שמעתי שיש מקום בו השמש זורחת כמעט כל היום והעצב מחייך, אני לא יודע איך, וראיתי באותה נשימה איך הלב מתעקש להחסיר פעימה ולקחת אותנו למקום שמצאנו שקט בתוך מהומה, ושם נמצא לנו אושר קטן בחיים שהגלידו מתוך פצע ישן. כולנו תלאים באותה רקמה, כולנו צמאים לאותה נחמה, ושנינו זוכרים מה הבטחנו אם הגענו לכאן. כנראה שניצחנו, כנראה שניצחנו.
שמעתי שיש מקום בו מציאות אפורה מתבהרת פתאום
לאמת בודדה ושולחת תודה. הייתי באותה נשימה יד שמושטת טובה וחמה, היא שומרת עלינו ולוקחת את שנינו למקום שכולו נשמה.
ושם נמצא לנו אושר קטן בחיים שהגלידו מתוך פצע ישן. כולנו תלאים באותה רקמה, כולנו צמאים לאותה נחמה, ושנינו זוכרים מה הבטחנו אם הגענו לכאן.
כנראה שניצחנו,
כנראה שניצחנו, כנראה שניצחנו,
כנראה שניצחנו.
ושם נמצא לנו אושר קטן בחיים שהגלידו מתוך פצע ישן. כולנו תלאים באותה רקמה, כולנו צמאים לאותה נחמה, ושנינו זוכרים מה הבטחנו אם הגענו לכאן. כנראה שניצחנו,
ניצחנו,
כנראה שניצחנו.
ניצחנו.
כולנו תלאים באותה רקמה, כולנו צמאים לאותה נחמה, ושנינו זוכרים מה הבטחנו אם הגענו לכאן. כנראה שניצחנו,
ניצחנו,
כנראה שניצחנו.
ניצחנו.
Summer 2006, the second Lebanon war. I'm an 18-year-old teenager who somehow just graduated from high school, and I get a phone call which will change my life. I got an offer from an organization called Thank Israeli Soldiers to establish a project in which young people will go into hospitals and will accompany the wounded soldiers of the war. For the next 8 months, I was there every day in the hospital corridors with the wounded soldiers and their families. 8 months where you see people fighting every day to get back to their normal life. I'm not here to talk about myself. There are many stories and experiences to share from those unbelievable days. But if there's one feeling I want to share with you, it's the frustration. You finish a day in the hospital where you're with the wounded soldiers and the families, and you go back home, and you see the streets of Jerusalem full, and people are in bars in Ben Yehuda, and the stadiums, and the malls life just went back to normal. There was no war. And I wanted to yell out, guys, the war has not finished. Some battles are not done. For many years, every time we had a war here in Israel, and unfortunately we had many wars, we always salute the fallen soldiers, we hug the bereaved families, and somehow we forgot those who paid a heavy price, who gave part of their body, maybe even part of their soul for this country. 6 years ago, in 2014, the Israeli government made a decision. A National Appreciation Day for wounded IDF soldiers will be marked every year on the 17th of Kislev. Tonight with me are three dear friends who will share with us their experiences, their thoughts on this day. So I want to start with Judy Goldenberg from Moshav Gimzu, mother of Gidon, who was injured in 2006 in Lebanon. Thank you for being with us.
Hello.
Shahaf Segal, who was injured in 2009 in Gaza, serving in the elite reconnaissance unit of the Golani Brigade.
Shalom, thank you for having us.
And Itai Avraham from Moshav Yonatan in the Golan, who served in the reconnaissance units of the Armored Corps in 2006.
Shalom, everybody.
So, ladies first, I'll start with you, Judy. Summer of 2006, the IDF is operating both in the south in Gaza and in the north in Lebanon, and you have two sons serving in the IDF.
Right. In 2006, if we want to go back and think what happened then, Gilad Shalit was abducted in the summertime, and the entire army was on alert. It was a very tense time, and Gidon was a deputy commander in the Orev branch of the Golani units, and he was down near the Gaza border. 2 weeks later, my second son, Tomer, got married, and Gidon was only allowed to come for like 2 or 3 hours to be at the wedding, and then he had to go back to Gaza. 2 weeks after that, war broke out in Lebanon, and Gidon's unit was deployed to Lebanon. They were sent up north to the Lebanon border. In addition, Tomer, who had just gotten married, was drafted to reserve duty, and he was also sent up to Lebanon. And we had two sons in the army, like you said. And then one day, something happened that every Israeli parent who has a child in the army knows and fears. This is a scene of a taxi driving up to your house. 2 or 3 officers come out of the taxi and knock on your door. And everyone knows what it means. It's not good news. It's very, very bad news. And this happened to us one day. My husband had come home. We live in a moshav. He had come home from the fields just to get something for a few minutes. And he opened the door. He saw the officers, and his first question was, which one? Which of the sons were they coming to tell us about? They came to tell us about Gidon, but fortunately, the news was that he was wounded and he was still alive. He was fatally wounded. He was in intent with them to Haifa. We're about an hour and a half away to Rambam Hospital. Our third son, Tzachi, the oldest boy, was in France doing research for his doctorate. And as we were driving in the taxi with them to Haifa, they turned around and said, call your son Tzachi and tell him to take the first plane back. That was the first boom that we got. Tzachi was coming back immediately. That means that this is the end. We were very, very worried. The news came out from the Moshav to the rabbi of the Moshav, and right away around the country, everyone was supporting, everyone was praying for Gidon ben Yehudit, Gidon the son of Yehudit, and that's how my daughter heard about it, through the SMS.
Wow. And then you reached the hospital.
We reached the hospital, and when we got there, the waiting room, Gidon was in the operating table, and we couldn't see him, of course, but the waiting room was full of Golani personnel. Anyone who wasn't in Lebanon practically was there. They all knew him well, and they were stunned. The whole population there was totally stunned, as we were, of course. And right away, the army started hugging us and taking care of us.
So we'll get back to that experience in the hospital shortly. From Lebanon to Gaza, Shahaf, early 2009, you're part of the Golani reconnaissance unit, and your unit gets a mission to go inside to Gaza.
Yes, I don't know if you remember, but after 9 years of constant rocket attacks on Israel, unanswered from Gaza, Israel decided in early 2009, late 2008, Israel finally decided to retaliate, to have some sort of a major operation to answer to those attacks. I was already a combat soldier, a sharpshooter, a combat medic for the Golani reconnaissance unit. We were up north doing our basically job, what we are needed to do up north, and they flew us down south. I don't know why they flew us, because after that we waited on the border for another month and we were training in Mala. It's a special urban center for fighting. We had training on the Sajaya and Jabalia neighborhood, which are the toughest neighborhoods in Gaza, and we always receive them. Me and my sergeant, Dvir Emanuelov, we walked in, we fought from house to house. Sadly, in the morning, Dvir got injured and basically got killed from a terror tunnel. They waited for him. They waited. He was the last soldier in the line. They tried to kidnap his body. I saw him lying on the ground, and I ran to save him. As I got on top of him to pull him to safety, I saw that he was badly injured. Sadly, passed away. And as I came to pull him to safety, a Hamas sniper shot me in my left arm. That was the end of my story of fighting in Gaza, but that's just a different battle that started in a whole new area.
So we will discuss that battle in length tonight. Okay, so we will discuss that battle in length tonight. Moving on to you, Itai. July 12, 2006, the war begins in Lebanon, and your unit is actually deployed in central Israel, in Samaria.
Correct. It was a Wednesday morning that I remember perfectly. The GOC General Officer Commanding of the Central Command has paid a visit in my unit, and being that super motivated soldier, I wanted to be chosen to be asking a question that we had to ask him. We got only one question. And my question was if my unit can be moved, can be transferred to operate in hotter operational combat zones. And while he was answering my question diplomatically, he was receiving a note from his secretary. And he glanced at the note, and then he said to us, if what's written here is correct, you're about to do great things soon. An hour later, we found ourselves carrying as much combat gear as we could, and 2 helicopters took us to the Lebanese border. And we only knew that 3 IDF soldiers were kidnapped and killed by Hezbollah, and the entire north of Lebanon is being targeted by them. As we landed...
North of Israel.
Yes. As we landed, I remember looking at the border, and it looked like it was taken from an action movie, because the border was smoking, and I heard many explosions, and above us, a helicopter gunship was shooting a Vulcan cannon above us. And at that moment, we understood that the Second Lebanon War has broke out. About 3 weeks later, the infantry forces received a very big mission to enter and conquer the entire part of South Lebanon. And we entered with different forces, infantry forces of the Nahal. A few days later, it was a Shabbat morning, or before morning, and I remember that the Nahal forces was receiving massive fire from Hezbollah soldiers that were at the village right above us, and many wounded soldiers on the stretchers were coming down. And I remember looking at one of the stretchers, and I saw a fully covered soldier. Only his shoes were sticking out, and then I realized that this is a war, this is chaotic. I could be also ended up fully covered on a stretcher. A few hours into the morning, my team received a mission to go up and set up an ambush at the edge of the village inside an olive grove. And about 30 minutes into the ambush, a big bang, a missile hit in the middle of the force, injuring a few of my friends, and followed by dozens of mortars and more anti-tank missiles. And I remember that the only option we had is to retreat, because, you know, anti-tank missiles and mortars can be shot from range of even a mile away. And I remember feeling frustration because I'm a fighter. I'm a combat fighter, and I don't have anyone to shoot at, anyone to shoot back at. While we were retreating, I remember that looking to the sky, hearing that very terrifying whistle of a mortar coming down, and one of them was crossing my sight, landing next to me, but keep on rolling. And I was so caught up in the moment that I didn't realize that it was a dud. It did not explode miraculously. But another one came and exploded behind me and flew me over. And I landed on my face, and I remember getting up, ready to keep on fighting or retreating. And my vision was blurred, and my face and my shirt was wet. And I was looking at my hands, and I'm seeing blood, and I realized it was my blood. I was bleeding very heavily from my face and my nose. I was going down to, thank God I did not lose consciousness, and I remember going down to the preparation point, expecting to renew my gear and fight. And then the paramedic forced me to sit down and be checked, and then I realized that I'm injured. And at that moment, that I'm realizing that I'm injured and I'm hurt and I'm useless, I cannot fight anymore, I cannot help my friends, and then I felt the mission that the IDF sent me to do. That was a turning point for me.
So we'll get back to you shortly. Judy, we spoke about reaching the hospital. You drove up to Haifa. The next time you'll be home will be 2 months later. For people watching us, hearing us, can you describe maybe those 2 months, the atmosphere, the feeling, the challenges of being with your son in the hospital?
I don't know if I really have to explain how a mother feels when their son is fatally ill, fatally wounded. I think it's pretty clear to everybody, but the months in the hospital were an amazing experience. I think today my husband and I are more traumatized than Gidon is, just thinking of the days and talking about it constantly. We arrived, as I said, in the hospital, and the army had a lot of services to help the families of the wounded. They gave us rooms in Haifa hospital. As you said, I stayed there for the next 2 months without going home. And Gidon was in intensive care in the beginning, and we couldn't go in all the time. It was something like every 4 hours we were allowed to come in for 15 minutes or something like that. And we set up camp outside the door of the intensive care unit. We didn't move the whole day from that door. And people kept coming to visit us, people we didn't even know. The first Friday we were there, all of a sudden a couple comes over with bags of cakes and chalot for Shabbat and said, "We have friends in America who are your acquaintances," and they called us up and told us to go to a bakery and buy cakes for you and come give them to you because we know that you're in the hospital with Gidon today. And it was just so moving how the whole country, and even in America, everyone was just so supportive and so helpful. A relative from Canada told us that 300 young yeshiva students were praying for Gidon every day. And I think thousands of people throughout the country had Gidon's name written on their refrigerator with a magnet to pray for Gidon ben Yehudit every time they light Shabbat candles or every morning. And even though it was a very, very difficult time and we were very worried, we saw that the doctors were doing everything possible. People said, "Don't you want to move him to a different hospital closer to your home?" And we said, "No, they're doing everything that they can and even more, and there's no reason to move him." And he was getting better little by little. And after a while, they moved him to the department for burns, and he was put in a separate room and taken very good care. And we just sat by his side, and I decided that my job for the next few months is just to make him comfortable and to take care of any bureaucratic things that have to be taken care of, and leave him totally alone just to recuperate, not to have to think of anything else. And that was our life for the next few months.
It's amazing how, I'm just amazed how you're able to be so positive talking about those days. Shahaf, you're evacuated from Gaza to the hospital. What is it like, first morning or first night waking up in the hospital and understanding you're in a new reality, or as you called it, a new battle?
Yeah, I got evacuated from the battlefield with another friend of mine who got injured from a mortar shell. He got very badly injured, and I kind of hitchhiked with him to the hospital, to Soroka Hospital. Kinda, you can call it like this. Yeah, he was flown, he was in a very bad condition, so I hitchhiked. When I got to the hospital, I was wide awake, I was responsive, I told the whole story. I actually insisted to call my brother. My brother was also a combat soldier in a Golani. It's another reconnaissance unit of Golani. He was actually, when I was fighting down south, he was actually on his way north to defend the border. I insisted to call him and let him know that I got injured. He immediately said, because he knew that I'm in the fight, and he said, "Why are you calling me?" And I told him, "You know why, I'm injured." And he said, okay, we're on the way. Immediately understood. My mom, he picked her up. Everybody came to the hospital. I was actually going into the operation room, and then suddenly I can hear him between the two doors of the operation room, and suddenly the nurses are screaming, "Stop, that's his mom." And my mom is walking in, and I'm consoling her. I'm like, "Mom, I'm okay, I'm okay." And my mom is crying, and the nurses are crying, and I'm like, "Oh, that's not a good situation to walk into an operation room with," but I'm doing my best. I woke up at night, and every time since the second I got injured, and in the hospital, I actually kept asking about my teammates, about Vir, about Liel. I kept asking what's going on with them, and they kind of wanted to keep it in secretive from me. And I, even though I was, after the operation, I was very, sedated, I insisted on getting the answers, and then they told me in the middle of the night after the operation, they told me that Liel is actually still in operation room, and Vir is actually, even though I knew it, I saw his injury and I knew how badly he was injured, but I couldn't be the one who says that, because it would be like me setting his fate, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to do it. And when they told me that Vir actually was killed and actually was dead already in Gaza, I tried to get up of bed and go to his family and go to his grave, and I couldn't even stand. That was a very hard, that was my breaking moment. I broke. I was a 20-year-old combat soldier, a man in my own eyes, and I broke down. To say that I understood the situation, I didn't, not in that moment. I wanted to go back fighting. I wanted to, somehow with a dead arm, I wanted to go back and fight with my teammates. I didn't quite realize the situation I'm in. It took me a while to understand that going back to the army is a non-issue. That's not gonna happen.
One moment you're on the top of the world, a brave hero. The next moment you can't move your arm, you can't stand on your feet.
I have to say it drove me mad, because suddenly people are standing for me in the bus and giving me their seat, and I'm 20 years old, and 5 minutes before people looked at me, and if I would sit in an empty bus, people say, "Are you not okay? What's wrong with you? Stand up, you're okay." And 5 minutes later, people are offering to tie my shoes, and that drove me mad, because as you said, in combat soldiers, in elite unit, you are second to Rambo and Superman. And suddenly Superman can't move his left arm, and it's hard. It's hard to receive and accept.
Superman can't move his left arm. Wow. Itai, can you maybe share with us the first days in the hospital, comprehending the new situation, your new status, I guess you can say, as a wounded veteran of the IDF?
So I remember being airlifted out by the same unit that I'm lucky to be serving in nowadays, and I got to the hospital, and it was the fastest CT that a person got in the past. I realized my injury, and I remember going back to. I remember calling my mother on Motzei Shabbat on Saturday night, telling her that I'm okay, but I'm a little bit injured, and yeah, I tried to set up the mood. The day after, a taxi driver took me from the hospital in the north to my home, which was near Jerusalem, and I walked out the car. My mother was waiting for me downstairs, and she was bursting in tears. And I remember hearing the taxi driver says to himself, "That is a mother's hug." After that, when I said that was a turning point for me before, when I realized that I am useless as I thought, worthless, useless, couldn't fight anymore, that was a turning point for me, because I decided to never feel the same way again. So my recuperation process started there, only I didn't realize it. It took me many years to process that my actions and the things that I chose to do in my life, with my life, are the outcome of that moment when I was injured.
So, speaking about decisions being made and coping with the challenges, Um, Open question to all of you. Can you share with us maybe, we spoke about the difficulties. Judy, you said that the hug from the whole country where Gidon became everyone's son is what gave you strength. You spoke about the challenges, the difficulties. What gets you through those rough days? What helps you get through it? What gives you strength?
I'll start with one word and allow everybody else to answer. I can continue it, but family. Basically, my family was my rock, my mother, my brothers, my sister, they were my rock. And again, the hug from the Israeli country, the hug from the Jewish people. But basically, it starts at home and it ends at home. And my family was my everything before and after my injury.
But I'll challenge you. In the middle of the night, 2 a.m., you wake up in the hospital, your family's sleeping in the room nearby, in the motel there.
No, in the room.
In the room.
My mom would not leave the room.
I see. So there was no alone.
No.
I would ask you, what would you do when you're alone now and there's no one around?
Alone is after. Alone is after the hospital. That's where the alone starts. But again, I was 20 years old. I lived at home. If God forbid I needed something at 4 a.m., my sister, my brother, my mother, if anything I needed, just a word, doesn't matter if it's a hot cup of tea and sit for a conversation, my family was there 100%. I have no doubt that without a strong and amazing family as the one that I have, I don't know if I would reach the places that I've reached today. And that's it. I know when in the hospital, they brought a psychologist to start talking to me. And very fast, I told her, listen, with all due respect, thank you, but I mean, I don't need you. I have the best psychologist on earth. It's my mom.
We have a psychologist here on.
Yeah, 100%. Who knows me better and who wants better for me than my mom? And I think that having this discussion with a mother here, because I've spoke to many injured soldiers, and to hear a mother's perspective, for me, it's amazing. So thank you for coming, and it's a great idea to bring her. So my mom, my family, they're my rock, and they're my solution for everything. Sorry.
I want to say the exact mirror image of what you said. If you said your family is what gave you strength, I think what gave us strength was Gidon and the way he reacted. He was very wounded. He had many operations and many skin grafts, and he went through a lot of pain. And physiotherapy was a very, very long and hard process for him. Up until today, he's still not 100%, and he still has disabilities. However, he didn't want to talk about it, and he didn't want to settle with it, and he never complained, not once, and he never said, why did this happen to me, or why did I go to this unit, or why was I fighting? Everything was just looking forward to the future. And if I said that the whole country gave us a hug, this is the time that I want to talk about the volunteers, and Yaakov can say what he wants. There was a group of volunteers, Yaakov was their leader, who came every day to the hospital, and they came with pizza, and they came with ice cream. We still call Yaakov ice cream in my house. And they brought the wounded, these boys that we were afraid to let out of their beds, they brought them to basketball games in wheelchairs and in ambulances. And they brought celebrities to their rooms and made parties on Hanukkah and on all the other holidays. And all of a sudden, my son is normal again. He's with a group of boys his age and playing around and joking and making fun. And he's not with his doctor or with his old mother sitting next to him and crying. He's with these young people, and life is going back to normalcy. And it was just amazing to see and just watch them all forget that they were all wounded. They were boys. They were young men. They were making jokes. They were talking sex jokes and dirty jokes.
Not me.
No, not Yaakov, not Yaakov. And making fun of their wounds. And things that other people, maybe Yaakov will tell us soon, but things that other people hear and can't believe. And they were joking around about the body parts that they lost and about their the operations they were undergoing. And it was just seeing how they were looking for the future and talking about regular things gave us the strength to sit with him and to be with him and to watch them all get better. Thank you, Yaakov.
Itai.
All right, I'll try to make it short. It may sound philosophy, but to me it was thinking about that I want to justify my existence because it was really hard for me to be injured. I was supposed to be a fighter. I grew up in a very unique situation where, the second Intifada, I was a child, I was a teenager, and having friends who got killed by terrorists, knowing that words like explosive vests or suicide bombers are common words, like Facebook is today, wasn't normal. But it made me think about many things, but also how to change the reality, how to do good in the world, how to be better, how to take my abilities and stop the terror, to that matter. So I was enlisted to that unit that I thought I would be giving the most of me. And all the process of my army service, the 16 months of training, the operations we carried out, everything has led to me to that point that I wanted to do more than the regular stuff. So the Second Lebanon War to me was the opportunity to make a difference, because when the entire northern part of Israel was targeted by missiles, I felt the same frustration the citizens felt, because back in Jerusalem when I grew up, I felt the same frustration, going on a bus thinking it might explode, sitting in a coffee shop or going into a shopping mall. And who knows if I'm gonna end up in pieces. And being injured has made a too hard of a step, and it stopped the process of me helping the world and changing the world in reality. So every choice that I made, being a paramedic, being a nurse, joining the local search and rescue unit, police unit in the Golani where we live, serving in an elite unit in reserves duty, to me is the way of giving more and making that turning point worthwhile, making the injury worthwhile.
Gives you validation. We spoke about it shortly. There is, excuse me, there is one moment I think that I recall as an 18-year-old that I celebrated every time an injured soldier left the hospital. It was like a feeling, let's celebrate because it's over. And when I look at it today, I understand it only begins there. So maybe can you guys reflect on that, share with us the challenges of afterwards, as you called it, being the real time being alone starts after you leave the hospital.
Sorry, yeah. Yeah, obviously when you're in the hospital, you don't have a minute alone. I'm sure everybody here can understand that sensation because everybody's coming. You spoke about pizzas and ice creams. We got everything, pizzas, ice creams. I got fat just from looking at it. And it's an amazing hug, and it's great, and it's lovely, but you don't want people in your house, especially after that, and they cannot, everybody come to your house. The alone sensation starts there. It feels like you're done because you're out of the hospital, but basically, for many wounded soldiers, the battle only starts. I had 5 long years of rehabilitation, from surgeries to physiotherapy that they were mentioned here, and it's a daily struggle and battle to understand. First, to understand that the situation has changed, and then to understand how can you become better within this situation. For me, just the understanding of something that has changed was more difficult than finding my new position in the situation. I had 5 long years of rehabilitation and surgeries, and I've decided on myself to stop them because it could have gone on forever because my arm was in shambles. It was completely dismantled. So I decided after 5 years to stop it and move on to the next part of my life, which is studying, which is bettering myself in different locations. I did my LLB and MBA and MBA in 4 years. I did this because I felt like I missed a long period of time in my life. I looked around at my colleagues, and they're all younger, and they're all, haven't been through what I did. So I felt like I had to become better, and that was my way.
If I can ask, the physical injury, how does it affect you today?
Well, as I've said, my arm was completely dismantled. I got shot from a very big round, a very big bullet. It was a sniper's bullet. It completely dismantled my arm. I'm talking about all the muscles, all the tendons, all the nerves, both bones. My shoulder popped out and still have permanent damage till today. So the arm was in a bad situation. After 5 years, I got to a point where I can move it. It's here. It's not perfect. It's not what it used to be, but it's still here. And I use it, and I love it. And it's mine, and it's 100% mine. Instead of just cutting it, the doctors in the hospital said, it's not going to work. It's going to be over. Finish it. Just cut it and move on. And I, on the operation table, insisted of trying to save it. And I'm very happy with it's not perfect, but it's the outcome that it's still here, and it's still mine, and it's good.
It's just unbelievable. You just made that little move, which we make so many times every day, and we can't take it for granted.
My arm was dead for like 7 or 8 months. I couldn't move it at all. And it was, and all the doctors said, listen, I don't know if it's even worth keeping because it's just going to be there and not do anything. And after 7 or 8 months, I was standing in the kitchen with my sister, talking to her. And as it was a drill that I did with myself. I told her, I literally told it to move. Imagine you commanding your limb to move, and it's just like, whatever. And after 7 or 8 months, I'm standing in the kitchen with my sister, making myself coffee. And then I just as a drill, again, told it, move. And then the slightest twitch. I mean, it was barely even noticeable. I had to ask my sister if it's actually happened. A slight twitch. And for me, that made a whole world of change. That was a sign that we are on the right way.
Judy, as a mother, saying as a young father today, what Shahaf just described to me takes me back to my little daughter. She's 7 months old, and she's just starting to crawl, and the excitement of those little moves. And Itai also has 2 little girls, and we're so excited as young parents when our children make those first moves, first steps. And you experienced it again with Gidon at age 24.
Freud talks about the different stages of development. And he talks about the stages that you're very close to your mother in the beginning, a child needs the mother, and then there's the separation, and then there's this stage where the child goes off on his own and to become independent. And what happens when a soldier is wounded, he goes back to the first stages again. He's totally dependent psychologically as well as physically. Also, there's the stage, the oral stage, Freud talks about, when food and things in your mouth are very important, and you see it with the soldiers also. All the different things that we were talking about, ice cream and pizza and meals and things like that. They're going through different stages again. And it takes a while until the soldier gets to the stage, the wounded soldier, that he's independent or that he starts separating from the parents. And to tell you the truth, there's a stage where the parents have to separate from the wounded because it's very difficult. You're used to doing things for him, and all of a sudden you have to step back and let him do it on his own. Because for months already we were like tied together inseparably, and I would be with him in all his different doctor's appointments, and all of a sudden he's going on his own, and I was afraid what was going to happen to him. How was he going to manage? And that's part of it, him managing on crutches, in the beginning on a wheelchair, and then on crutches, and little by little he became independent, and he moved up in the stages. There's a difference between the physical state and the mental state. If we're talking about today, or even 10 years ago, Gidon still has many physical problems. He can't totally move his leg. He has to drive a special car because he can't press the pedals for the gas or the brakes, which is quite a problem when you want to rent a car when you're abroad. Now at home he has his own car, but when he needs something else, it's very difficult. But he doesn't even think about it. He doesn't talk about it. He doesn't act as if he's handicapped. He, in the beginning, after about a year and a half, he started playing basketball again with his friends. He really, really wanted to play basketball. And every Saturday night, after Shabbat was over, they would go to the basketball court and play. And he couldn't manage it. He kept wounding his good foot. And then he didn't have anything. And he said, I can't do it any longer. So what did he do? He joined a group in Jerusalem of wheelchair basketball games. And he was on the Jerusalem team for a few years playing wheelchair basketball. The first time I went to see, I was crying. You see your son in a wheelchair? He doesn't need a wheelchair. He can walk. But this is how he could play. And he said to me, Mom, why are you crying? Look how much I'm enjoying the sport. I'm doing what I like. I'm letting my body get strong. I have friends. What's the problem? And he didn't see any problem with it. And this is the way he advanced on. I just want to say another thing. He could sit in an office with air conditioning in a nice, comfortable chair, and he wouldn't have any problems at all. He's got skin grafts. He needs air conditioning. He needs a nice, cool area. Gidon studied archaeology. He works in the dirt. He works in the heat. He works on fours, on hands and knees. And it's as if on purpose he was looking to compensate and find the hardest thing possible to prove that he's okay. And he is. He's okay.
May I ask of the first step? by Gideon? Because I remember my Twitch as a life-changing moment. Was it special for you as well? I'm sure it was special for him.
With us, it was in the hospital. The physiotherapist made him get up and take steps, and he was screaming the whole way. And little by little, they got him moving, and it didn't come by itself. They were pushing him on each stage. But he and his friends, we were joking about it before the show started, he and his friends would roll on the mats and fight it with each other until the physiotherapist came and started fighting with them and making them do the difficult practices.
I'm holding myself not to share some of the scenes. Itai, you're 14 years later. How present is the injury today in your daily life?
So, not other the other two guys. I was lucky enough to be injured in my face. I have a few broken bones and a platinum plate that holds them together.
It's okay, you're still pretty.
Yes, thank you. They made me prettier. And a nerve damage and a muscle damage. But, yeah. So, but it took me a while to understand that it's not about the physical rehabilitation, but as Judy said, more mental. Well, to me, it was more mental rehabilitation because I feel the need to prove myself, to prove that I should be here, that I should do stuff, justify my existence. So it made me realize that a lot of my actions, also today, it's a realization after many, many years of not dealing with it, not coping with it, not talking about it, that it made me realize that my choices, are managed by that injury. So I don't have any physical effects, but I'm always thinking, how can I make more? How can I do more? How can I be more active and take advantage of my abilities and my energy and my power, also to empower other people to be and to do, but also myself and my family. So that's what I'm fighting for. To me, it's very true. That's what I feel that I need to do.
Amazing. Shahaf, you're 11 years later now.
Yeah, I mean, as he said, for me, it is a constant in my life. I have an arm that is, every time I try to do anything with it, reminds me of what happened. Obviously, the memory of my friend, Dvir, who's not with us anymore. I don't think there's a day goes by that I don't think about him and about what would be his choices. And we were head to head. We were literally defending one another a second before he got shot. So every day for me is a struggle with my arm, but every day for me is a struggle with the memory of Dvir.
Is there guilt?
Sorry?
Is there guilt, a feeling of guilt? Why me and not him?
I think that every soldier, especially if he's Iron Pair, that was a mere second before we were head to head, obviously there's guilt. I was the combat medic. What we were taught, I was also a medic in Red Star of David before, but what I was taught from the age of 15, and obviously after that in the army, what you're taught that the responsibility to bring your friends home alive is on you. You're there with them, you have the knowledge, you have the power, I had the medical bag, I had everything with me to save him. It doesn't matter that I understand that he was injured so badly, he got shot 4 times in the head by a very big round, an AK-47 round. That's not something that I could not have done anything. But the guilt sits with me. I was supposed to bring him home. And it doesn't matter if I should have taken the bullet for him, if I should have done anything else in my life to try and mend it. There is 100% sitting with me a sensation of guilt, and it will accompany me for the rest of my life. I can manage it, I can handle it, I look at it in the eyes, and I understand it, but it's there.
How do you cope with it?
Again, I'm trying to be very reasonable. I met with Dvir's parents. I think that if, God forbid, Dvir's mother, I'm sorry, his dad passed away before the army. I met with Dalia, Dvir's mom. I think that if, God forbid, she's amazing. She's more than amazing. She immediately walked into my house and hugged me before I even spoke a word. I was actually, when we walked into Gaza, I wasn't even nervous. I was happy because I saw rockets flying over my head towards my house. So I walked to Gaza, and everybody, my entire teammates, everybody were feeling we're going to defend our home. We were going to do something good. And when I was in my home, my house, with everybody who loves me, and when she was on our way to see me, I was scared. I was scared. The fact that she, I don't know if forgave me is the word, but hugged me and received the fact that I did the best that I could, and maybe what helps me is maybe the fact that maybe I prevented his body from being kidnapped. Maybe that's also something, because at least we have a place to go to and visit him. But I have my ways, and some of them are those.
Judy is a psychologist, so I think her head is working.
You can see the wheels turning.
Yeah, the wheels are turning. Gidon today is married. He has 3 children. Do you still feel the presence of those days in his life, in your life?
In my life, definitely. In his life, I think he's trying to put it behind him. Although Gidon was a company commander, and he had responsibility for his men. And when, after he was wounded, the army sent in 2 different tanks to take his soldiers out of the house that they were in Lebanon. And 2 different tank commanders were killed trying to get his men out. And even though he never met them, he goes every year to the home of one of them on the day of his memorial. And he feels very close to the family because this soldier died trying to get his men out safely. And I don't know if it's because of this or not, you could say what you want, but he named his son the same name as this soldier. So as a psychologist, I would say that it's definitely part of it. And today he just continues. He still does reserve duty. He goes to the reserves. He's a major today in the reserves in active duty. He does what he can. And I think what holds the whole thing together is a matter of ideology. When you go into the army with a very, very strong ideology and you believe in what you're doing and you feel as if you're part of a long string of leaders or Jewish fighters for 2,000 years who've been fighting for the Jewish religion and for 70 years for the Jewish country, you feel that you're part of something much bigger than yourself. My in-laws were both in the Holocaust, and Gidon and his brothers grew up with the stories from the concentration camps. And my parents made Aliyah from America, from a rich, educated society, to move to Beersheba, where they lived for 35 years in southern Israel. And my entire life, I've been trying to treat my children to understand that we're here for a greater life than just making ourselves happy or comfortable. And I think that this is what's the basis of the fact that Gidon accepted what happened to him, and he went on, and his job today is connected to discovering the history of the country, being an archaeologist and studying what's went on in the past. And when you connect your past and your future together, you're able to stand what goes through in the present much easier.
Spoke about ideology, and I want to ask you guys a question that I am asked by many, many teenagers when I give them lectures. Looking back now, you sacrificed something, you gave something for this country. Would have you done it again?
Well, I think that that's what I'm trying to prove to myself every day, that I would do it again, I would do it better. For many years, I wanted to go back to that same point, the same place. I was dreaming about it, you know, and fixing the reality and not being injured, not getting injured. But my way of fixing it is the way that I live, to live strongly, and to do the things that I do in order to help people. I'm doing it mainly in the medical field, but helping people, saving lives, literally saving lives, or preventing loss of life on a daily basis, you know, minute to minute, and doing it with many different kinds of hats. as a paramedic, as a nurse, the search and rescue unit, the military combat search and rescue unit. That's what I choose to do.
I know about myself. I can't speak for my mom because my mom was the. I grew up. My mom was the. I was. My parents were divorced. My mom was the one who raised me. There was always, you spoke about ideology. The talking of ideology in Israel was always to give from yourself, to give everything that you can do for this country and for these people. My brother was also a combat soldier. It goes Golani, also a reconnaissance unit of Golani. My dad is also an IDF wounded veteran. My brother lost friends in service. All of my friends, everybody gave their utmost to the army. So I can only speak for myself. I don't know about my mom, but the ideology in the house was always, always, always give the utmost that you can give. I would 100% do it again. I have no doubt about that. I was willing, everybody who goes to those places, I actually was not supposed to be a combat soldier. I didn't have the right profile for that. I had very big glasses and they didn't want me as a combat soldier. I actually sat 2 weeks in the army prison to get to the Golani brigade. After 2 weeks, they probably understood that I'm not all there, which is perfect for Golani. And Judy can. So after 2 weeks, I understood that I'm the right material, and I reached the highest that I could have, and I wanted to. So I fought to get there. Everybody who is there knows the risks. If not, he wouldn't arrive there. I was willing to give everything. Vir sadly gave everything. I gave a small part. I think that the injury took away from me, but also gave me so much more. If it is the realization of a reassurance of the place of my family in my life, the place of my country in my life, and the fact is that I could have been in a much worse situation and still be happy, and I am happy today. So yeah, it took away my arm, but it gave me so much more. So 100%, no doubts, I would do it again.
One last topic before we conclude. We are all watching, I'm saying here in Israel, everyone is watching today a show called Shat Neila, Luck Hour, or Valley of Tears on HBO Max. And this show, together with When Hero Flies, which was on Netflix a couple of years ago, put in the headlines the issue of PTSD, post-trauma. And many times when I meet groups from abroad, this is something, especially in the United States, that really people are worried about. And they ask me, how in Israel do people deal with it? And I mentioned at the beginning, when you lose part of the body, you lose part of the soul. And I think every injured soldier also has this aspect of facing post-trauma, PTSD. Your thoughts on this, your experiences?
I can talk for, not for myself, but for a friend that I know. I was participating in a trip, a ski trip, through an organization that deals with injured veterans. And I met him, and he told me that he never leaves house. He never leaves house because he's afraid of noises, of anything that can trigger a memory. But doing the regular things like skiing, or we started in a simulator in Israel, and then went abroad to an Eastern European ski town, and he came and he joined, and he met more people, and he was able to go outside of his house, doing the regular and normal stuff. And it also made me realize that there's more than, some injuries are invisible, like PTSD. And being with people like himself, with other injured veterans that can understand him without even talking about it, giving him a hug, and look, the look in each other's eyes, that served as a family for him, and he was able to go out and cope and deal with it. That is amazing, and that's one of the stories that I know.
You want to put as a psychologist view on a?
Unfortunately, there are many, many Israeli veterans who are suffering today from PTSD. The Army is aware of it. They're doing a great deal to try to help. There are groups of people from 20 years ago or even farther from the Yom Kippur War who are still suffering, and the Army is trying to help. Today, there is much more activity in the Army done on the spot to try to avoid it. There's a lot of talking. There's groups that meet after every battle to try to, even with the psychologists or what is known as kabanim, to try to discuss what happened and to ventilate and to get it out. Unfortunately, it's one of the costs of war, and we just thank God that we managed to avoid it somehow. But it's a very, very sad problem because, as Itai said, it's sort of like an invisible disability. Other people don't see and other people don't always accept it, and people start blaming the person for their actions, and it's a real disability.
We spoke about, I think, awareness, and we spoke about being able to ventilate, to share it with someone who understands you. That's part of giving cure to this problem, not problem, to this phenomenon. Before we end, I'd like to ask you about the day that we met to mark, the Appreciation Day for Wounded Soldiers. What are your feelings on such a day? What are your thoughts?
It seems that the majority of the stories we hear about, heroic stories are from soldiers that killed in a battle. And I think it's an opportunity, the importance of the day is an opportunity to hear the stories from alive soldiers that was there and came out alive, to hear about their stories, about their personality, about their life process that brought them to that point of fighting a fight for Israel and surviving it, and the way they coping and recuperating from that. I think that it should give us, it can teach us many, many things, many values of loving Israel, loving the country, having the need to serve in the army and protect Israel.
If I may say, I spoke to many of my wounded veteran friends. I think that there's maybe from time to time at certain points, some wounded soldiers maybe feel maybe a slight sensation of shame, maybe guilt, maybe not necessarily, but the survivor's guilt, but the guilt of maybe everybody are always the Memorial Day for the ones who went away, and for many years a lot of soldiers felt shame. I think that maybe this day would bring it in a new light. I think that the Appreciation Day for the wounded veteran soldiers would give them a sort of pride and maybe some understanding for other people, the sensations and the stuff that we have to go through on a daily basis, that the struggle, as we said, didn't end in the hospital and didn't even end after, and most of us would have to handle it and manage it on a daily basis for the rest of our life, and maybe that will shine a new light on it.
I agree with my friends here. I think everything they said is correct. And I think that part of our society, I think Americans and Israelis, it's not something just Israeli, is very cynical. And we don't usually appreciate all the good that we have. And I think a day like this showing, when we have Memorial Day, it didn't end happily. And you can't look and say, well, good things came out of it because people didn't manage to get through. But if there's a day that shows that the people were wounded and they managed to overcome and they managed to keep going, people will be much more thankful of their own lives. And I think it might be very positive, have a very positive effect, not only on the wounded soldiers who are remembered on that day, but on the rest of the country as well.
Wow. So first of all, thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
For your time and for sharing your experiences and your reflections. We can go on for hours. I'd like to end with saying, first of all, I'm here not just as Yaakov. I'm also here on behalf of the people of the Golan and the Golan Regional Council. And the Golan is a place where some of the most epic battles in the history of Israel happened, and the people of the Golan appreciate the sacrifice made for this beautiful region. I mean, you've probably been there in your last vacation, or you guys will be there in your next vacation.
I live there.
We live there. We enjoy it every day. And it's just a chance for us to really show our appreciation to so many people, to you, and to so many people who gave something for this country. I really, you took my conclusion. I was going to say, that really, if you ask me about this day, what really, as I began, I said, made it so special for me is not that I said, okay, finally someone will recognize the wounded. It's finally we will be able to say thank you. Finally, I can share the feeling of appreciation with others who can understand and look at you guys and also say thank you, but also look at myself, as you said, and say, wow, I'm so thankful for everything I have. I mean, we spoke about that little twitch, right? I mean, I woke up this morning, I have 10 fingers, 10 toes, I hear, I see. It's unbelievable, and we can't take it for granted. And I think seeing people overcome these challenges, hearing their stories, see how they cope with it is something that doesn't just show them we appreciate them, it teaches us a lot about ourselves and gives us a lot of inspiration. So I think that's, in my eyes at least, the right way to look at this day. And I want to thank you, everyone, again, for everything you've done for this country and for all the great lessons and insights you guys gave us and inspired us with. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And for our members abroad, remember that we are one family, and Israel is also your home. So thank you.